Well, with me is Matt Bradley, who's Middle East correspondent with the Wall Street Journal. And until recently, Matt, you've been reporting from Baghdad and Erbil. Now, we just heard General John Allen there saying we're going to defeat ISIL or ISIS or Islamic State or whatever we choose to call it. How do you see this battle on the ground?
Well, without a U.S. commitment to providing ground forces in Iraq, it's going to be a very long fight. And other senior U.S. officials have already said that the fight to take back Mosul, which is kind of like the Islamic State's second capital and their first capital in Iraq, is probably not going to happen until next year. And so General John Allen, in the segment that you led with, just said that, that this is about buying time. Well, this is really going to be quite a lot of time because the Iraqi military that's picking up the other part of the fight after the United States offers airstrikes and weaponry and training, that Iraqi military really doesn't have the capability to pick up where the U.S. and its coalition partners are leaving off.
And is it an Iraqi military that includes Shia and Sunni together, as the newly formed government promises? That's the idea, isn't it? That's
the idea, but right now we're talking about an Iraqi military that's been run through with sectarianism, run through with corruption, that lacks training, that has really serious structural problems, that really just can't pick up where the U.S. forces left off when they left in December 2011. So we're looking at a military that is essentially, and U.S. military leaders have said this in the past, is corroded about halfway. About half the units are essentially incapable of being reformed and won't be able to really put up a fight against the Islamic State.
And what's your sense of who they're facing in Islamic State? Are these largely foreign fighters or are they Iraqis?
It's both. It's foreign fighters and Iraqis. But our understanding is that the Iraqis are the ones who are picking up most of the battle. They're the ones who are applying most of the pressure in the Iraqi military and the Sunni tribes and on the Shiite militias. So when we're talking about sort of who is Islamic State, we have people from all over the world, from Europe, as we've seen. We've seen some of the speeches in English language, you know, these decapitating videos that are very troubling. But for the most part, we're talking about people from the region, from Syria and from Iraq.
So when there is talk of an ideological or international battle against Islamic State, is this, in your view, overlaying what's essentially a type of civil war?
It's a sectarian war that's bringing in the entire region. So we're seeing Iraq as kind of the playground or the sandbox between two of the major axes of sectarian power in the Middle East, and that would be Iran, which is the center of Shiite power in the Middle East, and Saudi Arabia and some of the other Gulf monarchies and some of the other Sunni majority countries to the west. And that is all finding its center, its fulcrum, right in Iraq, right around Baghdad, where these two kind of polar forces are pitting themselves against each other, and that's why this has taken on such incredible dimensions throughout the region and so troubling for so many people.
And Matt, I suppose that's why, especially from the perspective of an American journalist, the US authorities don't want to get too involved. They certainly don't want boots on the ground, because then it plays into the narrative of IS, doesn't it? That this is the West, here come the Americans again.
That's right, and when I speak with people on the ground in Baghdad, when you speak to Shiite militia leaders, they say, oh, well, you know, the only reason why the United States is here and the only reason why they're putting in military power is because certain ethnic minorities or certain religious minorities are threatened. And then if you talk to Sunnis, they'll say, oh, well, the United States, they're just intervening now because they're trying to protect Iranian interests, or they're trying to protect Shiite interests. So no matter what the United States does, or its coalition partners, or Britain does, they're kind of it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't equation, and they will always be criticized by one side or the other because the sectarian goggles, the sectarian prism is the only way through which people in the region can see this conflict.
As you're reporting, you're on the ground there in Iraq, reporting back for the Wall Street Journal. What's your sense of how much your readership or your public cares about what is happening to Iraq?
Well, it was interesting, of course, the level of scrutiny and attention increased so dramatically when we saw these two American reporters being really gruesomely decapitated on television. And for many people in Iraq, that was kind of like, well, we've been suffering from this for quite a while. There were thousands of people who were killed in Iraq, Iraqis who were beheaded, who were shot dead in execution style. And we saw videos of this where there were just grisly execution style murders going on, especially of Shiites and Yazidis and Christians throughout the northern region of the country. So for many in this country, in Iraq and in Syria, the Western attention to the conflict came kind of too little too late, and it was a question of complexion.
Well, Matt Bradley of the Wall Street Journal, thanks very much for bringing us your insights from being on the ground in Iraq. Thank you. You're watching World News Today. I'm Philippa Thomas. You can talk to me about any of our developing stories on Twitter @PhilippaBBC.